Yes, I believe so.
All right. Call to order the Historic Preservation Commission regular meeting,
Speak into the microphone.
Monday, December 2nd.
Hand him his
2019.
microphone.
Call to order, call to order, and roll call.
James Hensley,
Here.
Aaron Brown,
Here.
Patrick Kerr,
Here.
Valerie Duncan,
Here.
Adam Ropp,
Present.
Lynn Bilodeau, absent, and James Long, absent. All right, and Joe Chappell.
Present.
All right, we have a quorum.
All right. Approval of previous minutes from the regular meeting on November 4th, 2019.
Move to approve.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Vote.
James Hensley,
I just want to call to the attention, don't know if I'm out of line or not, but page 2, that last time we met, we made a motion and seconded it that we would like the Historic Preservation Commission landscape architect be hired to assist in the project, and it was passed 7-0. I just want to make that note, that we all passed.
oh, okay.
Okay.
Got it. James Hensley,
Yes.
Aaron Brown,
Yes.
Patrick Kerr,
Yes.
Valerie Duncan,
Yes.
Adam Ropp.
Yes.
All right, passes.
Did I vote?
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Yes, sorry, Joe. Joe Chappell.
I thought I'd had a senior moment.
No, I had one. Sorry about that.
All right. Item number 4 is HPC application 19027. This is a discussion and potential action on a request for a certificate of appropriateness for a new information kiosk to be located on city-owned property at the corner of Harrison and Division. Staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you indicated, this is an application, this actually is in conjunction with the Guthrie Chamber of Commerce, looking to put a kiosk at the corner where we have our lot and has the cabana there at Harrison and Division. One of the things that has come about is there was a grant opportunity with the state through the state or the Oklahoma Historical Society, where they had grant programs up to $20,000 for similar things such as this. So we have put in that application. We will not know if we're funded until probably, I think, the third week of January is when they're making their decisions. This is one of the things that the chamber had been wanting to do, and it happened to go with the timing, obviously, of now potentially having funding. So that's why it's coming forth for you, to you guys for review. The grant was for $15,000, which we feel is enough for the kiosk, and that should cover all costs. Might even have a little left over, not really sure, but should cover the cost. It will also provide a basically area plaque, or we'll have to figure it out, to designate or have a designation of the historic district and a brief history on the historic district, probably similar to what we had in the historic preservation ordinance, a little kind of blurb about the district. And so the kiosk will be looking to have it right near the existing cabana there on the property. As you saw in the attached report, it will be, or at least initially, we're looking to have it exactly like what ODOT had done over here off of 2nd Street by the bridge. They did an information kiosk for the new viaduct, and so that is a picture of the existing one. This one will be based off of that. So it'll be about 6.5 feet tall. It'll have the top cabinet area is about 30 by 36 inches with a smaller lower panel area of 24 by 30 inches. And as you see from the picture, it'll be painted black. So with that, I put it back to the commission. Obviously, Tracy from the chamber is here if you have any other questions of her.
They had applied through us for a kiosk about 1.5 years or 2 years ago, and we approved it, but this is a completely new design. And so in having conversations with Tracy, she wanted to go ahead and bring this back to us since it is a completely different design. And so just to kind of make sure we dot our i's and cross all of our t's. We had already approved a kiosk in the past, but now this one is going to look like one that's already existing.
It's going to be kind of on the corner of Harrison, of.
Yeah, it'll literally be next to the existing cabana there.
Kind of,
Yeah, I think on the
To the-
west side? Yeah, kind of on the west
the
of the
left.
cabana.
well, left.
We were talking about putting it on the east side, but because of the curb extension possibilities, we don't want to wait for that to be resolved, so we thought we'd just put it on the inside.
Oh, okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Tracy,
Yes, sir.
I remember sort of when you were here before. What's the difference in the design? Because this seems more modern to me than the other one.
It is. This was the one that you all had approved previously.
yeah.
It's a little bit different. It's still going to be two-sided. The reason we went with this was because Leroy suggested that we do something that's cohesive. So if you walk around town and see different signs, that they're all the same. And so we thought we would try to match the ODOT one. But the chamber's purpose of this is one side is going to be the map of downtown, and the other side is going to be changed quarterly. It's going to be a list of events that are happening during that season. So we want to make you all happy.
Is that other one two-sided?
It is,
Yes.
yeah. So frankly, we want it to look nice. We want it to be historic. But our bottom line is to be able to
Right.
help visitors and to
Right,
help
right,
people
right.
in town know what to do. So,
Can we see the other design?
Yes.
Please? Okay.
I will add that the grant application was not specific to a certain design, size, or anything of that. It was simply for the general purpose of it, which again was to designate or have a designation of historic district, and a brief history on it was kind of the only thing it would have to incorporate. But as far as size and design, there was no specifics that needed to be submitted, so there is leeway to change it in any manner you feel fit.
and the positive side with the newer version, it has the smaller portion that we could have the, whatever we wanted to say historically to be in that and not lose space on the map side or the event side. Kind of just gave it a little extra spot for a sign or a plaque.
So in the continuing conversation, I've been a part of the conversation with Tracy and through Dan and whatnot, but the point of why they're submitting this one is because it does match one that is already existing in the area.
I like the original one better.
I like the original one better,
I do too, but
but I like sardines.
Was the ODOT one approved by
I
HPC?
can certainly
No.
see, I can
I
certainly,
don't
There-
believe so. Well, no,
there was
maybe
one
wasn't it?
about a year and a half, maybe even
I can
2
certainly
years, a
see
year and a
why
half
they-
ago.
That ours,
Yeah.
that we originally,
No, no,
oh, he asked about the ODOT one.
the
Oh,
ODOT
okay,
one.
sorry.
I was saying, I
Sorry.
don't believe that came forth to the commission.
No, that
Yeah,
didn't.
I didn't think so.
but here's my point with the one that's existing near the bridge. The bridge it sort of winks at the past, but it's also modern, and this is a real contemporary design. And I think this works over there, but I think the more historical one would, just my opinion,
I think
would
it
work
fits more with
better.
the character of our town.
It has more character of the town. I just think, I love contemporary stuff. In fact, my house is pretty contemporary. If I was putting one near my house, it would be this one. But that's just my thought. So, any more discussion? Any more thoughts other than the design?
I just like the other one too.
Dan, can they approve our formal one? I mean, I don't know how procedure goes
Yes.
with
Oh, yeah.
this.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean,
Is
You
the
do-
cost
She doesn't
comparable, you
care.
think?
Yeah, we'll make the cost, we'll make it work.
I make a motion that we go with the original design.
I second that.
I have a motion and a second.
James Hensley,
Yes.
Aaron Brown,
Yes.
Patrick Kerr,
Yes.
Valerie Duncan,
Yes.
Adam Ropp,
Yes.
Lynn Bilodeau,
Yes.
Joe Chappell.
Yes.
Okay. And I mean, I was just going to add that worst-case scenario, obviously, if we do get the grant and some things changes, we can bring back a design that
Like if
would
this
make
isn't
sure we get everything, but would be
anymore,
similar to
something like
this.
that.
So,
All right. Item number 5 is discussion and potential action on an amendment to the Guthrie Historic Preservation Ordinance, sign guidelines, recommended sign types to allow for horizontal and vertical freestanding banners and flags. Staff report.
thank you, Mr. Chair. As you guys probably remember, this was at the September Historic Preservation Commission. There was a workshop, and some of the signage was discussed. At that time, it was addressed that the open flags that were around were not currently in the code. So there was a suggested code amendment that came back to the October Planning Commission. That went to the November City Council meeting, and the City Council sent it back because they were not, they had some issues with what was there. One of the issues, and I don't inherently disagree with, was the fact of limiting flags with certain wording, and that there could be some First Amendment issues that could arise. They have in the past in different areas when you try to limit the what a particular sign can or cannot say, size and size limitations and that's really not an issue, but when you get into limiting what they can say, it is an issue. The other issue that they brought up was they didn't think that it should be limited to strictly just the open flags, that they should be able to have basically a freestanding sign for any business. So with that, it was brought back to you guys for review. You will see in your staff report that I did a revised amendment that took out the open flags. It would allow for any vertical or horizontal banner, if you want to say flag or banner, to exist. It would be limited to one, so if you wanted an open flag, you can have an open flag. If you wanted to put up a feather flag, you could put up a feather flag, but you couldn't have both. And then there's also some additional on the sizes. The sizes for the flag stayed the same. That was 36 inches by 60 inches. I did some research on the standard freestanding vertical banner feather flags, if you want to say, and most of those are around, I think I left, oh no. I think I left that out of there.
You did put that they shouldn't exceed 8 feet.
Yeah, there was a height, but there was also the limitation on, because it was basically a 2-foot wide by, I think, 30 inches or no, 3 feet. I forget the actual sign size in there. In that, and then
30 inches?
the what?
I think it says vertical flag.
Yeah, it
30
can't
inches.
exceed 30 inches. Yeah, you're right, it's in there, yeah, which is basically the width. And then a not to exceed 8 feet in height. So again, it would be open to any type of vertical, horizontal type flag banner in that. So with that, that concludes staff's presentation, and back to you guys for discussion, and once again, your recommendation.
Do we have any comments from anyone on the side?
Hello again. I'm Cherie Gordon, Licorice Man, 112 East Oklahoma. And I just wanted to make a comment. In fact, I did some research, and I'm probably preaching to the choir here, but I checked the flag regulations for Charleston, Savannah, and Fredericksburg, which were cities that we aspire to be, I think, still, but we're working on it. They either do not allow flags, or they're very restricted in what they allow. I think, in my personal opinion, as a retailer, I want people to come to my store. It's important that they know that I'm open. So I do not oppose an open or welcome flag outside my store. When my flag's out, my customers know that I'm there. But I do think there needs to be some restriction as far as the kind of flag. I personally do not like the feather flags. To me, they're very modern looking. They're just not cohesive with our look. I like just the plain open flags. I don't care if they're red, white, and blue, but I just think some kind of requirement needs to be, some standard needs to be set to say this is what we approve for our historic district. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry.
Anyone else?
Hi, I'm Lucy Swanson, and I live downtown, and I work downtown, and I've lived here all my life. And I have to say that my opposition would be to the feather flag as well. I think it would seriously impede the integrity of our historic district and the aesthetics that we're trying to create, obviously. It's very modern. I have no problem with it in front of a car lot, out on the highway. I think it's very helpful that way, but I think for our historic district only, and this would only be affecting the historic district if the ordinance prohibits those flags, I think it would be very important for us to preserve the integrity of the historic view, so to speak. If I'm standing up on top of the hill up here, I don't want to look down and see some pink flag in front of a boutique down the street, I want to see, I don't care about it being pink, but it's so big and tall that that's all I can see down the street, I can't even hardly see the signage sometimes. So anyway, that's what I would recommend, and I hope that you guys would approve that amendment to the proposed ordinance amendment.
She says she approved.
Hello, I'm Gary Good. I have Gallery Grazioso at 301 West Oklahoma Avenue. And I just want to basically agree with the ladies. Sheree was talking about the other historic towns. One of the reasons that I came to Guthrie was because of the historic feel and the great buildings. And I can't imagine how it would look with all these feather signs all over downtown. So I just would agree with them and hope that you would have some kind of uniform flag, that there is some restriction as to what can be out there. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Is anybody here in favor of the tall feathered flags, the vertical flags? Anybody want to speak in favor of doing that in the historic district?
Right.
'Cause frankly, Mr. Chair, when Sherry and I were talking about this on the way in, and I'm sorry I was late, we were coming from Edmond, left work and came straight here. We were talking about this, the whole idea of the amendment to the ordinance is that people are already putting flags out, and right now, they're not even legal, any flags out.
Right.
And so, Abe Lincoln said the best way to get an unjust law changed is to strictly enforce it.
Right.
So we could have strictly enforced that and then got everybody up in arms. So we're trying to accommodate what people are already doing. But I was thinking that we had talked about in our workshop of allowing certain horizontal flags, but not the feathered flags in the central business district. That was my understanding.
Well,
It is.
this only affects the historic
Right,
district. They'd be
right.
allowed
I
everywhere else.
understand.
One of the things that came up at the city council meeting was the, freedom of speech issue. And, one of the things I noticed just last week, and, you don't always have to agree with something, but allowing people the flexibility to, we restricted it to red, white, and blue, and welcome and open. And, I think to compromise, because compromise is always a good thing, that we should keep it harmonious by having the same size of flag, the traditional rectangular flag. And then if people want a pink flag or a blue flag, or they want a marijuana leaf, then they can do whatever they want to. But those the rectangular flags, you'd still be able to take a picture of downtown Guthrie if you're a tourist and still have a picture that looks like an old vintage town. And I think that's one of the problem with the banner flags. So as commissioner, can I make a motion? I think I can.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't believe that there would be anything that prohibits it. Yeah. I was just going to add real quick, if I can, just like I told the city council, it is a local preference or a city preference, whatever, a community preference when it comes to signage, flags, and all that. Some areas, they don't regulate anything. Some areas, they highly regulate it. Others are in between. And so it is a community preference type thing of whether you want to allow them at all, in a certain manner, sizes, all that. As I indicated, the only thing that could get us into trouble would be the freedom of speech. But as you indicated, it would be very easy to do it just as a horizontal type flag, take the feather flag, vertical flag aspects out of this and, go
And
with
let
that.
them do whatever
Yeah.
they want to with color or wording.
Yeah,
or
exactly.
Then we don't have a freedom of speech issue, and then we still have, and I would think primarily most of the people that are going to get a flag will still probably get the red, white, and blue, and there will be the occasional exception, but it won't be, a 8-foot vape sign or loans or, so, yeah.
I may be completely out of line, but I don't see where putting a sign out on the city property would violate your freedom of speech for your business. It's not on their private, it's their private, that's the city owns that place where they want to
Oh,
put
I
the
see what-
flags.
I see what you're
How can that, I don't see how that would
I see what you're
violate
saying.
somebody's
I see what
freedom
you're
of
saying.
speech by putting it out on public property. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah, but I don't think that's a murky pool that we even want to
Right.
get close to.
And I really
dipping
think
our
we wanna-
toe
I
in.
don't want to get into
I-
that.
I
Yeah,
really-
right.
just
I
don't
think we
like
just rather
flags.
avoid it.
I really think we want to compromise, though, and not have the feather flags, and let people have the freedom to fly a, Colorado state flag if they want to on their building, if that's their choice. I don't think people will. But, any other thoughts?
Does this go for permanent signage as well, or
No.
just flags?
This is just strictly for freestanding, and that's why the key
Just making sure.
in it is, freestanding. So it's something that is either going to be on the, attached to the building or out on that sidewalk area. The rest of the signage is still covered elsewhere.
And as Sherry pointed out, you won't find it. You'll find these flags lots of places, but you won't find them in any historic district.
No.
Anywhere in the country, probably, so.
I think that the proposed amendment should be rewritten to expressly deny the feather flags,
But allow.
but allow an open flag, an
Freedom
open
of
banner,
expression.
but not the feather flags.
Yeah, because that's obviously easily incorporated, that I can incorporate that when it goes to council. And that is to allow a horizontal flag, keeping the same dimensions that we have, which is pretty typical what's out there,
Right.
36 by 60. And again, it can be on the building or in the sidewalk right away and still limited to one per business. And then I would just put additional language in there so it was clear that a feather flag or what I would commonly call vertical would not be allowed.
Okay. But we just have a motion, right?
I don't think officially it was a
No,
motion.
we did not.
So,
You asked if you could make one, but there was.
Yeah, but now I don't feel like it.
Okay. I'll make the motion that we approve horizontal, freestanding, or on the building flags of whatever color, whatever wordage, but prohibit feather flags,
Or any vertical,
vertical.
yeah.
In the historic district.
In
In the
the-
historic.
Yes.
Only in the historic district.
Only in
I don't want
there.
people to panic.
I'll second that.
Okay.
All right, seconded by Hensley. All right, Valerie Duncan,
Yes,
Adam Ropp,
Yes.
Lynn Bilodeau,
Yes.
James Hensley,
Yes.
Aaron Brown,
Yes.
Patrick Kerr,
Yes.
and Joe Chappell.
Yes.
All right, unanimous.
All right. Item number 6, and this is sure to be a short one, is review and comment on the final design elements of Mineral Wells 2018 Land and Water Conservation Fund Grant Project. Staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you just indicated, this is bringing back to the commission to review and comment on the proposed park, Mineral Wells Park project. Staff did provide the entire improvement plans in your staff report. As indicated in the staff report, and as you can see out in the audience, Bill Myers from Myers Engineering, as well as Tenny Maker, our Public Works Director, are here to answer any questions you may have, concerns or otherwise. The only thing I was going to add, and it's just one of those things that I'm adding because I want to make sure that code-wise we're always on the up and up, is that there is a provision in our code, in the Historic Preservation Ordinance, that talks about new construction and it being compatible. So for the most part, from a code standpoint, the improvements just need to be compatible with the district. They don't necessarily have to have a certain architectural style or meet a certain time period. They should just have compatibility. So the only other thing I was going to add, which I always add, is there are no contributing resources currently within the park, so we don't have to worry about that aspect. And so with that, I'll leave it back to the commission and go from there.
Okay.
All right.
Yes, I'm going to add something. Yes, there are no contributing built or constructed resources in the park, but the park itself is a historic resource. So that plot of land is a historic resource.
Yes.
It's in all of our stuff here. I have lots of documentation if you want copies of it. There's a whole pile here.
Even the large pavilion was, that's not the original
No,
pavilion.
this
Right.
is more modern.
The pavilion is in its 6th iteration, being constructed in the original style, but it is not even in its original location. And of course, the park, the playgrounds and like the old splash pad water and the tennis courts and all that stuff, all of that stuff is modern, of course. So there's,
But the pavilion there does greatly resemble the,
it's built off of
The one
the
from the
original
turn of the-
style,
yeah,
but it's been rebuilt like 6 times.
right.
But it is not in its
Who
original
knew?
location. I did.
6 times.
I didn't know that.
That's why we have her here.
The current one was redone, I think 4 or 5 years ago when the tornado
Longer
came through
than that.
town.
Has to
The
be.
90s.
Yeah, it was longer ago.
It was longer.
No, I think.
No, it was, I was here, living here when it happened, and so I've only been here since 2011, so it,
Yeah, and Chuck Bircher was mayor. I
so
know that.
and like the roof caved in, and so it's been rebuilt since then.
Yeah.
But it looks,
But it looked like just the 5th iteration. I know that. Because I remember the 5th.
I can prove 6 times. So the part,
And if you look at the pictures from 1900, it looks.
it looks exactly the
much like
same, yeah. So, but the park, that plot of land is actually the historic resource, but nothing built and constructed in it. The original park actually included where the fairgrounds is and where the water treatment plant is, and that basic flat piece of land in between where you come from the railroads to the railroad easement, and then all the way up to Division.
So where did they play the actual football game, is what I want to know.
Actually, so
To the
it's
south of the pavilion is.
to the
Oh,
south
to-
of Pavilion.
to the South of the.
Apparently, according to the people on TV, the creek was still in play.
Yeah. The
The creek was
still-
definitely still in play. I'm glad everybody watched the Bedlam game. That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah, we made the game.
So, but that's really cool. Mr. Chairman, my suggestion, since the city council is having a workshop and a meeting regarding the same project, my overall suggestion would be to address any of our questions or issues, comments, and concerns, and have Mr. Myers and Mr. Maker answer any of those questions
would be
as
great.
much as possible, and then pull all of our questions together to then go to the city council meeting
Sounds good.
tomorrow night, so that they can then continue to address any other concerns that we don't get answered tonight.
All right.
That would be my
Yeah,
suggestion.
and if I can, just to make sure everybody understands that it is a special meeting tomorrow night at 6 o'clock to discuss the park project.
Okay.
It is also on the regular agenda, I think, if they're going to take action, but there is a workshop beforehand at 6 o'clock.
Because our job is to make recommendations to the
Yes.
city council. So if we have any of our questions to ask Mr. Maker and Mr. Myers.
All right.
I know, Patrick, you have one burning question.
Do you have in-house registered landscape architect?
Do we have an in-house registered landscape architect? No, we do not.
No, does Myers?
Question was Myers.
Does Myers? Okay.
Okay.
Do you know that there's a law that states that you have to have a registered landscape architect registered in the state of Oklahoma for section 46-1? And I'll give you the definition of a landscape architect. It's the performance of professional services defined as teaching, consultation, investigations, reconnaissance, research, planning, design, preparation of construction drawings and specifications, and construction observation and the coordination of any elements of the technical submission prepared by others in connection with the planning and arranging of land and the elements thereof for public and private use and enjoyment, including the design and layout of roadways, service areas, parking areas, walkways, steps, ramps, pools, parks, parkways, trails, and recreational areas.
No, we wasn't aware of that
Well, I don't,
law. I'm not even sure how we get by with that with our,
Oh, yeah, I was going to say, Bill can probably answer, but I was going to say that, we don't have our city attorney here, but
No.
I don't know how a licensed engineer in the state cannot do what a landscape architect.
And I've seen that particular statute you're talking about, and, engineers do parks all the time.
Right.
It's a common occurrence, and even ODOT, when they're doing, what do they call it, downtown projects, with sidewalks and street enhancements and things, engineers can do it, or architects or landscape architects. In their literature, that's how they publish it. I don't want to argue with you about the law. I'm not an attorney, but all I know is it's customary. It's been done for years, and we've done many of them.
Just because they've been doing it wrong for years doesn't make it right.
Well, I don't want to argue with you.
Okay,
Nothing
so,
to argue about. It's the law right here.
num-
Again, I'm not going to argue with you.
all right, so number one concern to send to the city council is we want to make sure all of our i's are crossed and our i's are dotted and t's are crossed, and make sure we're not doing that wrong. So we'll send that concern to city council discussion tomorrow.
I had heard that question, and I actually asked Renee Spinato, who was a former city planner here, and she said it's quite typical for an engineer firm to be able to do what you're doing.
Yes.
So, but
And not only in Oklahoma,
I'm no
but across
lawyer.
the entire country and
no
world, I
lawyer.
think, as well.
Pardon me?
I'm no lawyer. but That's what I was told,
Right.
so.
So,
How-
go
How many
ahead.
parks have you designed, has Myers been involved in?
We've done from scratch, we've been in business since 1937, so that I can recall, we've done probably 6 or 7 from scratch. We've done retrofits and add-ons and different elements to parks, probably another 15 or so. When you're a city engineer, it's a common occurrence. If you look, there's not very many landscape architects in Oklahoma if you start digging into it, firms.
Well, I looked online today in Oklahoma City, there were several mentioned.
I have a question for staff, a couple of questions. What is the average attendance of the park on an annual basis? Does anybody know?
I do
I have
not
no
know
idea.
offhand. Have no idea.
Okay.
I know at lunchtime, there's a lot of people there.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I know one of the concerns that other commissioners have had is 96 parking spaces. What is is there a formula or rule of thumb or guideline that would help you in determining how many parking spaces go in? Because it seems like there's a lot of parking spaces for that little bitty space.
Well, I think in that particular situation, what we ran into, when you put a splash pad or a spray park
Right.
in, I mean, the allure of the park just is magnified, and the attendance just, it'll go, I mean, you can see what's happened to even at Banner Park, the splash pads we've done in other parks, they take off. And that's what we were trying to do. And the other thing was, by doing the parking, hard surfacing the parking and providing the sidewalks, okay, the access, that's for ADA access. Right now, a person, if they're trying to manipulate or to maneuver through that park, it's very difficult in a wheelchair or pushing somebody through a wheelchair. So that was part of the whole concept of doing the hard parking and the sidewalks, trying to make things usable by the entire community if we could.
So with museums, we were looking it up, for us, for museums, one parking spot for 300 square feet of space, and between 76 to 100 parking spots, you have to have 4 ADA and at least one that's van accessible, and the shortest route possible. And I'm a total advocate for ADA, by the way. But still, 96 seems quite a bit. And one of my concerns is when you first drive into the park and you turn right and because it's the one-way, the maps here, they have that entire initial lane is lined with parking spots. And I know that that's exactly where people are parking now on the grass and everything. Is there a reason, is there a justification or a reason why some of that parking, just the general parking, not necessarily the ADA parking spots, but some of that can be moved back to the back part of the park and we could still preserve a little bit of that tree-covered lane that's so pretty of the park?
Well, that's a very good question. What we looked at, we tried to put more parking on, I call it on the backside, so to speak, but we were trying to not disturb the shrubbery and the trees that were on that side. So we had to maximize what we did on the east side, so to speak, as you come in. We tried to put the parking where people are parking now, is what we
Right.
tried to do.
And I understand, I totally see that justification, but when you drive in, all you would see is like the butt end of all these cars.
Well, I think what would
And not
happen,
the
if we
park.
did delete that, probably we wouldn't be able to add it back. It would just
Okay.
be, I mean, from what I remember, without tearing out a bunch of shrubs on the west side.
I will say that in the original plan that we were given,
Right.
which was the only plan that we were told that we approved, correct? We approved the original plan in January. There were 80 parking spaces on the other side of the ponds.
Oh, the ones, are they in blue on your plot? Yeah. Those, you know, with the budget, it would have been too difficult to have done those as well. And that's why those were deleted over time.
Okay.
If I just going to answer a couple questions, because per the Guthrie zoning code, which would be the applicable ordinance or code, even though it's in the historic district, does not specifically have a park or a parking demand for parks. The closest that would probably come into play is we do have a place of amusement or recreation, which is one space for every 50 square feet used for assembly or recreation. So we're probably way below what we should actually have by code. Because when you reference museums, are you talking our code or a different code?
I'm talking state code.
Oh, okay.
And
Because
so-
our code, again, is much more demanding, because it requires one space for every 50 square feet there as well.
Yeah, we were looking that up today,
One
and
space for every 50 square feet of what?
What?
usable space.
Assembly or recreation, or basically, yeah, usable area. Now, one other provision it does have in the code is it does say that if there is not a specific parking demand listed there, the planning commission can review and make the appropriate recommendation of parking based on a particular use.
Okay.
Well, I know that, like at Highland Park, we had some parking added several years, the last year or two? And, of course, I live right next to Highland Park. And there's 133 parking spaces in front of, from Highland Hall, clear down to the gate. And I have yet to see half of them full. I just think that when people I think it's great. I think we need some paid parking, we need some handicapped accessibility. But one of the concerns that I would have, I'm not for sure, does the city, this is a question that I probably should have known the answer, and Dan may not know, but does the city own the property across the bridge leaving the park to the north? When you leave the park at the back, on that bridge, you
On
pull
Second
out.
No.
On Second Street?
You pull, you pull out onto Second Street.
Yeah, no, I do not believe, because, right, once you go, I think, over the bridge, it goes into private property. I was thinking to the south, but to the north, no.
Well,
Yeah.
to the south, it's definitely city
Yeah,
property.
yeah, but to the north, no, I think once you hit the bridge, that's
But,
it.
maybe just a suggestion for council to consider is that maybe because I have the same problem that Aaron mentioned, people that have lived here in Guthrie, you pull into that park and you go down that tree-covered lane, and it's sort of spectacular. It's sort of an Oklahoma-ish, if you know what I mean. You're completely covered in a canopy of old oak trees. If some of these, not all, but some of these could be moved to the south side of the park, southwest side, over by the water treatment building, without too much added expense, but just to maintain that flavor of that tree-covered, if there were like 5, and then another 5, and then another 5, but to literally pull into the park and have it look like it was a park for cars, I think would greatly affect. So that's something that I would like the city council to think about. So, on the parking.
Is somebody writing this down? Because
I am.
Okay.
I
Yeah,
am.
so am I.
I'm writing notes.
Plus, we have it on video, so.
Yeah, I'm writing notes. Okay.
Anybody else?
Well, I have some questions about, looking at the plans that I've seen, I'm concerned about the percentage of concrete to the grass that's going to be left. Looking at this, it doesn't look like by the time we get all the sidewalks and paved parking and splash pads and playground pads, how much grass is going to be left? Is there a percentage of concrete to grass?
I haven't calculated that number, but if we could do that. But we got to remember, too, we have an existing, what's that? Not a swimming pool, but like a waiting pool area that it's coming out, and the old basketball court's coming out. But we can get that ratio number. But I will say this, the drawing that you have, we are in the process of negotiating a deductive change order that we're going to present to council on the linear feet of sidewalk.
So this plan won't be what the final plan
It's
is?
very close. Let me, if I could pass.
Sure.
Sure.
We reduced the linear foot of sidewalk.
Joe, is,
Trying to maintain the ADA, to me, that's, I know we want it to look good, but at the same time, ADA, to me,
ADA is absolutely important. I'm on board with you.
And I don't think anybody up here is arguing that, but we're,
on the ADA, I'm attending the ADA committee.
Joe, is Banner Park ever full?
Pardon me?
Is the parking lot at Banner Park ever full?
Oh, I would have no idea. I don't have
No,
children.
there's no parking. Is
Pushing the children, trying to
what I'm,
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
Banner
I have no
parking's all in.
I'm asking a legitimate, I'm just asking a legitimate question.
Momentarily, as a side note, I'm sorry, I'm interjecting here. On the note of ADA, are we going to have any ADA swings or ADA playground equipment?
Built So say Bill can address that.
Yeah,
Yeah, the ADA the playground is a compliant, inclusive playground for ADA. So we're going to have the sidewalk to there. And as far as the swing, we're not a true,
like wheelchair swing or
no,
anything like
not doing
that?
that. Those are, we looked at that, they're very dangerous and
Okay,
very dangerous. So, but at least we have the, the inclusive playground, similar to the one at Banner.
okay.
So,
At Banner Park, the park's all outside the park, isn't it? In the parking all out on the
When you get
street?
to there.
Yes, all the parking is outside, curbside parking. Along your west side of the park, we've got designated parking, and then along the east side, we've got designated parking. I would say during just regular hours of the park, with no birthday parties, no events going on, I've not been by to see all of that parking full. Now, when you start seeing some birthday parties and events like that, then yes, you start filling up more of the west side of the park. To jump back onto the parking a little bit, staff has kind of presented and tried to put together a plan that fits what was, I believe, the 2002 comp plan. And that's what was in that plan that was adopted by council back, like I said, very back in 2002, I believe.
What is what, are you talking about the comprehensive plan?
The comprehensive plan, and in that comprehensive plan, what you guys are looking at is almost an overlay of what's in that comprehensive plan. That's where a lot of that parking came from, that is what you're seeing.
Okay.
Why wasn't this plan included in the information in our packet here? Why are we just now receiving this plan?
I think it was a revision.
Yeah.
It was a late revision.
But it hasn't been revised since Friday, when this was emailed to us.
Yeah,
we have not presented that to council yet. I mean, this is something that's in flux right now. We're putting the numbers together for it. So, I mean, essentially, it's,
But this meeting, it is a request for certificate of appropriateness.
For the
and-
final
and
plan.
For a final plan, and how can we grant that when we have not seen a final plan until
Well,
5 minutes ago?
Well, that was probably my fault for I guess, stating what was transpiring, because it was coming to the Historic Preservation Commission, so.
and I think with the holiday and everything, it was just
Well,
difficult to see.
I have to say, for city staff, I think this is a gross oversight. We should have been, this final plan should have been included in what we received Friday.
exactly-
Otherwise, how can we make an informed vote on the certificate of appropriateness?
moving on.
City staff did try to get a workshop before the holiday because we wanted to review a lot of this before it even went to the meeting. Unfortunately, a lot of people were not available, which is understandable, but we did try to do things beforehand, even the meeting, to try to get some of this hashed out.
Well, but what so if we'd had that earlier, I don't know, it's like this would have been there and that would have been, anyway. Moving on, and since Tenny brought up the 2002 comprehensive plan, and I've had a chance to review that many years ago when I first got on the planning commission, and this has been a question of mine since the project started. I sort of want the gazebo. In the comprehensive plan, it talks about that there needs to be some serious thought to building a larger gazebo on the south of the pond. I don't have my comprehensive plan here with me, but I can guarantee you it's in it. And one of my concerns, and I think a couple of the upper commissioners, was the amount of money and amenities that were being placed into what is a very small, canopied park. And the thought of being able to move some of the gazebos to the south side or the southwest side. And after seeing the arborist's report, the thought of adding more gazebos to that small center area of the park is a concern. And
Do you know where that one gazebo is that's already there, that's all the
so, I
way
mean,
on the west end?
I guess what I'm asking, Mr. Myers, oh, well, that's all right, Kenny. What I'm asking is why one or two of these gazebos couldn't be placed in a place in that park, because there is a big south side area there, which would also get rid of some of the concrete going to them on the south side, and adding some parking there and expanding the park instead of cluttering the old historical park with a bunch of amenities, I guess. So is that something that you guys have considered, or?
Sure, what we've done right now, we received bids on was it 5? 4 or 5 of the gazebos, and we're recommending that we not award those right now. So that's in flux. So, we can talk about that. I mean,
That's awesome.
so we used, I think you had some recommendations, some ideas on the gazebo, I think, and we used those. We talked to the manufacturers that you had told us
Well,
about.
I brought a catalog by. I
No,
believe.
and it was good, and it was very good information. And, but at the end of the day, we could probably buy them directly, and staff could install them and be more cost-effective. And that is something we could look at for sure.
On this plan, I only see 3.
There's 3 there on that plan. And that was more of we were looking at budgetary things right there. But overall, we've recommended to council that they not award the gazebos right now.
Well, I like the fact that there's only 3, because I think it feels less cluttered, but I love the amount of benches that you have around the playground and the splash pad.
That you what? I'm sorry, I couldn't.
I like that there's only 3 pavilions. Gazebos, pardon me. And there's plenty of bench space around the playgrounds and the splash pad, because as a mom of kids, I would be using that a lot.
If anybody wants a 24 by 36 plot, you can have this if you want it. It's easier to read.
Mr. Myers, I have a question about the flooding. The park floods generally at least once a year. How is that going to affect this area and the improvements that are going to be made?
Well, we're going to have to clean them off periodically, frankly, because of the floods. The controls for the splash pad or the spray park, we've elevated those somewhat to keep them out of it'll take out the controls with the flood. So, yeah, it's something that's going to happen. It's just, obviously with the parking and the sidewalks, they'll be fine. We just have to wash them off like they do now with the basketball courts. And the same thing with the spray park and the playground too. Spray it down. So,
And it was a pour-in material around the park?
the what?
The playground, a pour-in material?
Yes, it's a synthetic material. Is it 3
Kind of
layers?
like the track and field spongy stuff?
Similar to that. It's more for falls. And it's like what we did at Banner Park. Same material. The colors, we haven't selected colors yet or anything like that. It's too early to do that, but that'll be something in the submittal phase. We have their color chart.
Just to, in our packet, and this might be a question for you or Kenny, I'm not for sure. But we received the arborist report from the official letter from the arborist. And I'll just read the whole thing for everybody here. Number one, the age and current condition of the tree should be taken into consideration when deciding to leave or remove. Many trees could pose a danger to anything under them from falling limbs. And then the next three are the ones that concern me the most. Covering any area with an impermeable layer will stress the trees, but we really won't know how much until they begin declining. Number three was covering the area of the tree roots will decrease aeration, water infiltration, and increase radiant heat. All of these are stress factors for old growth trees. And number four is a change in grade and disturbing the soil around the trunk of a tree will cause future problems for the existing trees. So it's, I just wonder if, Mr. Myers, that the placement of these gazebos, was there any consideration, or Terry, Tinny, sorry, given to the placement of these gazebos, the parking, the sidewalks, and the trees? I did get a report, and just so people know, you know, that park was where the first governor was inaugurated in Oklahoma. I had a couple people ask me today, why is that park historic? Well, I mean, there's all kinds of reasons that park is historic. But those bur oak trees, and Shane Freeze, and I don't know how many people here in Guthrie know Shane, but Shane is a Guthrie native. He came up with he did his dissertation he's a landscape architect on the Elbow Project and the Elbow Park. And anyway, those bur oak trees in there can live for 400 years. They're really rare in Oklahoma. They're even rarer when they're that tall because it's got to be sort of like a perfect space for them to happen. And that just happens to be the perfect space where it happened. He said that sidewalks and foundations and pavement and any disturbing of the sort could be extremely harmful to these trees. So I don't know. I guess my question to Mr. Myers is, were you aware of the danger that it might cause to the trees? And yes, I'm sure there are some trees that maybe need to come out or some limbs that need to be cut out. But even the arborist says that this will cause future problems for trees. I just wonder if that was part of the consideration for the location of things.
It was. We tried to stay away from the trees as much as possible. Matter of fact, I don't think you'll see where we're that close to the trees. But again, the documentation you read there, I don't know if that is saying that any improvements in the vicinity of the whole tree orchard, let's call it, are going to cause problems. If that's the case, then we can't do anything down there. I mean, if that's the issue, we tried to stay away from the trees, tried to stay away from the shrubbery. So yeah, that was definitely something we went back and forth on and spent a lot of time locating trees and manipulating the alignment to protect them.
How many trees do you think are going to have to come out for this plan?
None with ours. Well, wait a minute, is it one or none? Zero.
Well, in the packet, it says you'll have to remove 2 trees for the splash pad.
We've adjusted the splash pad over as well, but 0 trees will be removed.
Okay.
And the splash pad
Cool.
is even on your submittal that you got Friday, that's a correct location of the splash pad. So again, the only difference between what you got Friday and now is we diminished the total length of sidewalk, and I think we took off 2 gazebos, I think? 2 gazebos.
Does anybody know how old the trees are?
I was told by Mike Freeze, who's Shane's dad, that Shane thought they were probably 200 years old and they could live for another 200 years.
At least 1887.
Well, they were probably here before that, so.
Yeah, there's some sarcasm in there.
I'm certainly nobody to tell you how to design a park. But my biggest, I'm just looking, I'm gonna have, since everybody else has a complaint, let me say mine.
Okay.
The
No, we
parking-
have a suggestion.
a suggestion. The parking spots over by the splash pad, the parking spaces inside the park just doesn't sit right with me. I mean, don't you have to walk from the curb at Banner to get over to the splash pad? Can't you walk a little bit instead of putting the parking lot right in the middle of our most historic park? This one here, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I mean, that's a
Seems like
good,
it sticks out like a sore thumb.
well, that's a good comment.
Okay, thank you. That's my comment. I'm through.
I don't take these as complaints. I just take them as
And you know-
Suggestion.
comments.
And, you know, everybody has an opinion. It's a terrible thing.
Yes, it is.
But even to, I have such a problem with the length of this parking on that drive into the park, because it's like you never get a second chance to make a first impression. That drive, and, you know, people walk it all the time. You know, I was thinking that the parking that was at the back was better than all of this on the front. I just think what I would like to do is, when we have a workshop, if we have a workshop, when the council is being presented with this, that we explore some options to keep the park from looking, you know, I keep thinking pay paradise and put up a parking lot. Why 93? Maybe it's the square footage, but I would just like, if we're going to have 93, boy, it sure would be nice to have 40 of them across behind the water treatment building, so it doesn't become a part of the character of that park. Because when people aren't parked there now, it's just a park. And now, when they're not parked there, it's going to be a long parking lot. I know in Edmond at Stevenson's Park, and this is something, you know, that Stevenson's Park is a very historic park. And Friesen Nichols is a company that's working on that. When the parking came up, they allowed 5 parking spaces, and then they had to have a green space. And then 5 parking spaces, and they had to have a green space. And that's the kind of, those are the kind of tweaks that I'd maybe like to consider and see, too.
Sure.
Just tweaking it. I think everybody wants the project.
Oh, yeah.
We haven't had a lot of opportunity to visit about it.
Okay.
Apparently, I have. They haven't. So, and they've got great ideas.
What was is there an issue with expanding anything to the west side where the one gazebo is now? Not the main one in the middle, but that one way over there in the, too far? Or what's your?
Yeah, we looked at that, and I think it's,
Utilities is going to be a big issue.
and access over there. I mean, there's a little bit of a drive from the north getting into that area. And I mean, that could be something ultimately we could do, but I mean, if we put all the parking over there, for example, then we got to get people back,
No,
you know, to,
well, I don't think anybody says it all needs to go over there,
Okay.
but this 92, you know, to get it down to something that's, once again, it's a compromise. It's like the flags. Well, it's just sort of,
It's
you know,
Mr. Baker to answer the question.
it's sort of,
sort of
you can just park anywhere,
park where you want to. yeah.
everywhere.
It's really uncomfortable as a walker at that park already. I always have to walk the opposite way of traffic because with my headphones on, I always feel like I'm gonna get run over by a car.
Right.
And then parking wise, I don't ever see, you know, people drive through it a lot, like they use it as a
Galen?
thoroughway to
Yeah, yeah.
go around Division.
Oh.
There's not ever a whole lot of people parked there. So I am also concerned about this 90 some odd parking spaces.
Yeah, it just seems like a lot for a small park.
If I could, just because we're recording, if you have comments, can you come to the mic, please? No, that's okay. I just, want to make sure.
She said.
On the parking issue, I don't know, and correct me, Bill, if I'm speaking out of place here. But I don't think it'd be a problem because of in our original scope that we looked at, which was the parking that you're mentioning in the blue, was always discussed as Phase B in the project. If we maybe looked at limiting what parking we have, as long as we don't change the square yardage that has currently been bid, and still look at possibly some of the parking being placed over there, because it was always looked at as Phase B in the project, which we've already had to limit down after we have bid the project. We've eliminated some of the parking that was in Phase A. So I don't know that it'd really be an issue if during the workshop, we'd look at repositioning some of the parking over to where Phase B parking was in the beginning. The only issue with that is we would then be putting more pedestrian traffic having to walk across the water crossing in order to access it if the
But if we had a
overflow parking was
gazebo on the
to
other
fill up.
side, they could walk to the gazebo on the other side too.
Yeah.
And maybe there could be some sidewalk over there because it wouldn't affect any trees at all. These are, these are just some thought. And I will say, I think it's unfortunate the bid was put out before HP had a chance to talk about it. But I still think, like you said, it can, if we can just move them a little bit, just not, I think it can be, that's just something that council can look at and hear from us that we think that that's, part of,
And
that's
that was,
something that we think that would keep the park a little more of the park's historical integrity.
Sure.
Because when you see the wagons down there and I mean like with the old horses and stuff, somehow that long strip of parking, I think you need it, but it needs to be stacked, a little bit. And even the one that you removed in the back, maybe it could come back. But it's at the back, so it's not as, I don't know, you can't see it from Division, you can't, you're not driving by all of them when you pull into the park to get that first impression. It'd just be nice if there could be some thought given to
sure.
to that, so.
Do we have any more questions or comments from commissioners?
Well, I had someone point out to me that people go to this park not to park their cars. They go to let their children play in the park or to have picnics in the park. So I think that is something that we really need to keep in mind here. And I will say I'm very concerned about the trees. As he said, they're rare, beautiful oaks. And I think that all consideration needs to be given to their safety as part of these plans, too.
Just one
Miss-
comment to the nice lady there. I drive through that park. I work downtown, I live out south of town, and I drive through that park 3 or 4 times a week. On my way home, I go down 2nd Street, drive through the park, ready to go home. I love that park. That park, I love it. I don't do it to get away from traffic.
Mr. Chair? Joe, we want to give the public opportunity.
Oh,
Oh, yeah, that's what I was gonna
sure.
ask.
Is there anyone here that would like to speak?
Yeah. Just please come up to the mic.
Somebody, please, take it.
I'm Abigail Ropp. I live at 910 East Cleveland Avenue, and I just have a couple questions. Number one, I want to know, as a citizen, with all of the park planning, how has it been with referencing other historic parks in the U.S.? Have we looked at New York Central Park? Have we looked at historical parks who have obviously had these problems before, that have had to work through them before, and referenced kind of what some of their solutions were, so that we're not trying to reinvent the wheel? And also then we can use the knowledge of much larger areas. I know you don't have as much cars in New York as you were in an area where people have a lot more drivability. But if you actually look up the park in Central Park and you look at all of the way that they have parking, not a single parking lot exists inside the main park. It's all on the outer skirts, and people walk. They don't drive in to then drive into another spot to then drive into another spot. When you take your kid to the park, you park and you go in. So that would be a question I would want to say to council. I'd want to ask you guys, has that been addressed or even looked at? The second thing, I come from Johnson County, Kansas. We have a ton of parks there. And the only parks that exist that have parking right next to the playground are in those tiny little communities, and it's your community park. It's not in the main park areas, and there's usually 7 or 8 parking spots for those houses. The rest of them, number one concern was, I don't want to worry about my kiddo running off and then getting hit by a car. They have dedicated parking spaces that are then quite a ways, several yards away from the main areas. So I would ask that, anyone who's trying to do this is maybe trying to consider too much convenience over the historic preservation of the park. So I would just say, making sure that when planning, looking at how everybody else has done it and keeping that in mind, especially when it comes to all these historic situations, because if we give too many compromises, eventually you compromise so much that you're so far away from what we originally wanted that you might as well not have had any of the rules in the first place. And I understand that you guys are trying to preserve all of that, but I would wonder with all of the planning if we're trying to appease too many things to make it super easy, and then you run into killing all your trees, and then all of a sudden we have to pay for all the trees to come down. That's another expense. So those are just a couple comments.
Thank you. I think a good, not Central Park, but Scissortail Park in Oklahoma City. I don't know if you've been there, but it's, there's no parking in the park. It's all away from the park.
Any other specific comment?
Lucy?
Come on, Lucy.
You're here, I'm gonna call on somebody if nobody's gonna raise
Well, I
their
will
hand.
say that most of you guys, and not you, are more my age than this age. And my age, we grew up with cars. Like, we had to have a car. We went everywhere in our car. We dragged Maine in our car. We wasted gas until it cost too much. But this generation right here is not car-centric, and they don't want to be car-centric. And if most of them had their way, there would be no parking places downtown, because that obstructs the purity of the area. There are lots of everywhere in Europe, they just have big squares, and you go and you park someplace and you do your shopping. I did almost hit some people in Ireland, but we're not going to talk about that. But what I'm saying is, if you're planning for the future, if you're planning for the coming generations, don't be so car-centric, because honest and truly, they don't care that much about being car-centric. They want to be more, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not wrong. They really are more concerned with the usability and the feasibility of actually having a family and raising a family and being a family. And so that's all you want me to say something else, Al?
No, that's good.
Okay, thanks.
Do we have any Uber drivers here?
Yes. One other thing that I just want to mention, because it was on our original, our one and only plan that we approved. And I don't know that this is true, Mr. Myers. You'll be able to tell us a little bit more about these gazebos, but we were told that there would be single-family Victorian gazebos, and that these were modeled after the original gazebos that used to be in Mineral Wells Park. Now, I know they weren't going to be an exact replica or anything of that, but they were going to be small, and that they would not be a contribution of in-kind labor due to detail and architecture. I mean, for what it's worth, I like that, because I looked at the old pictures and it looked like we were recreating part of that history. And I think that the new gazebos, can you tell us a little bit about Or is that, have you worked on that yet? Because you didn't say maybe that's not part of the bid that's happening.
Well, we did bid it, excuse me. We did receive bids on the gazebo. It was similar to the one that, I don't know who you'd talk to. Maybe you'd talk to the manager. We had you presented some ideas, and we found something similar to that. And we also found the original gazebo from whatever year it was. And these look similar to it. But what we were looking at as far as in-kind labor was just merely going to erect it. The gazebo would come in almost like a kit, so to speak. We'd have to pour a foundation for it and a floor, and then erect it. And we bid it out that way as well. And just the prices came in higher than what we felt we needed to spend at that time. So, and
You know, are these single-family gazebos? Are they?
single
small?
family.
Well, I mean, they're like a room for a picnic table.
They were
or
the 20 by
where-
20 nominal,
Pardon me?
20 foot by 20 foot.
20 foot by 20.
I mean, they're not square.
Aren't they made of wood too, right?
They're made of wood,
Right.
yes.
They're hexagonal, these,
Yes.
right here.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
So I think they're 20 from one outside edge to the other, I believe.
Okay.
And we were going to, now, the design, we had sidewalks around them so people could maneuver, but
Is the, and you know, I didn't look, but what's the roof? Is it metal or?
no, I think the roof was not shake, it was
Or
the
shingle?
shingle, yeah.
Like traditional shingles?
Not wood,
Composite.
not
composite.
wood, But
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
We don't want, if we can help it, we don't want to do wood. I mean, what?
That's
it
a lot
is
of
what's
work.
on that well, excuse me, the
Well, one of
sixth
them,
rendition, isn't it?
yeah,
The
you're
one in
right.
the park does have shake.
Yeah.
How about the
That
small,
was sort of crazy, wasn't it?
how about the small gazebo? I don't know I can't remember what the small gazebo has on it now. Do you remember? It's composite, I think.
No, I'm talking, when I mentioned shake, the big one.
Oh, the big one, okay.
pavilion has wood shake shingles, which is sort of crazy, I thought, but.
Yeah.
And then, just one other thing, and this is just a friend of mine mentioned this to me. You know, when I was looking at the initial meeting of the citizens, when they were talking about this, they talked about, for this park, they talked about more shade. You can tell I keep pushing to get a gazebo on the other side of that water. Part of the reason I like it is that it will expand the looks of the park and how attractive it might be. Don't know if it's possible, but people ask for shade, and you know, the amazing thing about this park, it's the park that you can go to in the summer when it's 98 degrees, and you don't need a gazebo. You need a gazebo in Highland Park when it's 98 degrees, and 20 people are standing under one tree. So that's just my thought on it, and I don't want to put a sidewalk in if there's any risk of it killing a tree, especially a 200-year-old oak tree. Those are my concerns. And yeah, moving them somewhere, I think we need to have them. I'm all for everything we're doing, but I just want to have, you know, Joe Coffin, who's also a landscape architect, he's going to come up tomorrow and talk to council. We need input from people that, and Joe is a former HP member, people that have a historic preservation background and who worked in specifically designing landscape areas. This park of all parks deserves that, I think.
Well, we can tell you this, that staff, we want the people to be as happy with the park as they can be.
And I know you do.
And by no means
We're
are
glad you're
we
here.
trying to
Glad you're here.
hurt anybody or
We
anything. We're
certainly
just
know that.
No.
doing our job, I mean, frankly.
You're
So,
just trying to give the people what they want.
well, so that's good.
And we're just trying to do our duty to protect the historical integrity of it to the best of our ability. And there's going to be compromises. There weren't splash pads in 1900. That's a compromise.
No,
There weren't choo-choo train playgrounds. That's a compromise. There wasn't any hard surfaces probably, and we're going to do that. We're willing to do that too. And we just want the council to know get some ideas.
I have a question too. What about expanding directly south of everything now instead of southwest? Between the, what is it, Waterworks? What's the red building?
Waterworks.
Isn't there nothing between there?
Where we used to have a community garden, I think
Yeah, but that's
OSU's
just a little
got
narrow
some.
strip, that's nothing. You're talking about behind the water treatment building?
Between it. I thought there was a,
Yeah, there's a little strip there.
Well, it's
If it's the area that's between the water treatment
Yeah.
plant and the
pond.
water's edge there, it's a real narrow strip. That's where the community garden area kind of has their area. Not a whole lot of room to expand in that area, usable land. To touch on Joe's idea with the splash pad and expanding over into where the older, small gazebo is, staff did look at that, looked at putting the splash pad over into that area. I believe Bill even at one point designed it over there, and then we realized that the water utilities was going to become an issue, was an issue.
Well, I really wasn't talking about moving the splash pad over there.
Well, and
No.
at that same time, we had a pavilion located over next to the splash pad. And then when we found out that with the utilities, I think staff took it and we just adjusted everything back over into the park, pulled everything back into the park. Now that we're looking at possibly doing we haven't accepted any of the bids on the gazebos. That, I think, could still possibly be an option to maybe adjust one of the gazebos back over into that area and then doing a sidewalk connecting coming across the little area there where the restrooms is to continue to tie the project all together.
Right.
I think what happened, though, was when we adjusted the splash pad back, we went ahead and just pulled the full project back into the original scope.
And when looking at these gazebos have concrete foundations, do they not?
Yes.
When looking at those gazebos, I know that in the original plan, there were 2 gazebos up front. You remember the one I wanted to move?
Yeah.
Right? There were 2 up front. But now when we're thinking about the integrity of these old trees, if a gazebo in any way in the center of that park, small as it is, if a gazebo could go out front, if they can just be placed where we're not putting any trees at risk. I just think, you can talk about there not being a historical resource in the park as far as structure, but those trees are a historic resource. I mean, they've been here longer than any of us.
Sure, and myself was the one that met with the arborist down there, and definitely, any construction, you're going to experience some means,
Yes. And
some
it
means.
just
It
causes-
just doesn't matter what you're doing. He walked around with myself, and we looked, and he pinpointed out these trees where stuff that I didn't know myself. But we have took this project and we've eliminated, originally we had curb and gutter, which was going to direct water, any water that's hitting on the parking. It was going to direct it away from trees. We've eliminated the curb and gutter. We've went to more of the stop block style, allowing the water to run off. We've made islands around every tree so that water can get to yet the tree. The current wading pool that we have down there in the basketball court, I don't know, I thought I'd called Bill and spoke with him, but the amount of concrete that we're removing in that area there's not hardly any difference from what we're removing than what we're putting in place with the splash pad itself. The playground surface is a porous surface. It's going to allow water to go through it. In the overall,
I hate to ask because it seems like, anyway, but what goes under the pour, is that, what kind of foundation is put under the rubber? Is it concrete?
it is dirt.
Oh, it's just dirt.
It goes directly on top of we'll peel out the sand. We're going to have to take out the existing sand, get to an established subgrade. Then they lay in a wire mesh. Depending on the fall zone of the playground equipment determines how thick your buffer pad is. And then you've got about a 1/2 inch wear course, which is the color colored surface that goes on top of your buffer pad. But it is a porous surface. Water goes through it. You put in drill big piers to allow the water to, so that it doesn't damage the material. So back to where I was at, staff has looked at several different things to try to protect the trees. We've went from a 6-inch depth sidewalk to a 4-inch so that it's limiting the thickness of the sidewalk. I mean, we've just about looked at every option that we can to minimize the damage to the trees.
Okay. Anybody else?
I want to say thank you guys very much for coming and being here and answering
you
all
very
of our
much.
questions.
Really appreciate it.
I think we all feel a little bit better and a little bit more confident about this overall project. And if this, do we have any more questions from commissioners? People, public? No? Okay. Well,
So,
I've taken lots of notes.
Yes.
So I will make a motion to table our certificate of appropriateness so that we can send all of our questions, comments, and concerns to city council for them to discuss.
Yeah, and like I said, I apologize. In the staff report, I had put certificate of appropriateness. If you look at the actual agenda, it just says review and comment.
Oh,
oh,
didn't
okay,
notice.
Very cool. Okay.
that makes a difference.
So I have lots of notes here, and I'll write all these up and then
Yeah.
make
Because I
sure
took
that
notes too, but obviously that would be great because I can compare them with mine and then.
we can
I
yeah, add
have it-
ours together.
Because what I can do tomorrow is then basically type it all out and then give it to each of the council members as part of the workshop, so they'll have the actual kind of document to look at.
But overall, I like this plan that you guys presented tonight because it lessens the amount of sidewalk here, and I think it's less crowded a little bit, but thank you very much for all your guys' work in thinking about everything.
So you made a motion.
So.
Oh, well, we don't need a motion.
Yeah, we don't need,
So
yeah,
you have to withdraw it.
So I have to withdraw my motion. I withdraw my motion. There we go.
yeah.
All right.
I have two comments.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think moving as much parking away from trees as possible. I don't see a problem with coming up with 93 parking places, but I would like to think of it as, like Joe was mentioning, where you have 5 parking spaces, 20 feet of green, a few parking spaces that are up close, especially where some handicapped people might want to be even closer. But think of the other parking as overflow parking, because it's on a regular basis, 93 parking places aren't going to get used in that park on just day to day. When there's a family reunion, somebody does something like that, and we have overflow parking, but I don't want to see it in the park area. That ought to be overflow parking. I'm fine, because we already have some parking right there. That's where people are parking, where it's just gravel, then it says, do not park on the grass, and they always pull up on the grass, right? That's where they all park right now. So there's some, and I'm fine with keeping some parking in there. And then the other comment would just be the citizens that are really concerned about how this park's going to go and what's going to happen. Go to the workshop tomorrow night at 6 o'clock.
Okay. Anybody else?
Just one comment myself,
Yes.
too. When this is all worked out and said and done, I have full faith and confidence in our city staff to do this right.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, me too, me too. Okay, then we're out of here.
Hold on.
No, no,
We're
no.
not done. We're not done.
No, we're not, oh, I'm sorry.
No.
I can't, I'm a terrible chairman.
Okay, just have a couple more. We can make
appreciate
them really short.
Okay.
Because I have no staff comments, so we can move to see if there's any commissioner comments.
Okay, are there any commissioner comments?
Well, I appreciate
And
The
thanks,
work that Dan
Mr. Myers,
does.
for coming.
Thank you, Mr. Myers.
putting these things together and for him to do what he did. I was shocked when I got an agenda the day after Thanksgiving. And I sent Dan an email saying, I can't believe you're even working on Friday. I appreciate you and appreciate all of the doing. I mean, they did a lot of work getting this to us. And it might not have been perfect, but I really appreciate our staff.
Everybody come out and participate in Victorian Walk these next couple of weekends in downtown Guthrie.
Yes.
That's why I have this ridiculous-looking mustache. It's coming off on the 15th. Because we're open, our museum's going to be open the 7th and the 14th. And we actually have more of it open this year than we did last year. We have some temporary heat in the building, so we won't freeze as bad as we did last year. And some people will even be able to, we're going to have a working press demonstrating and printing some things.
That's awesome, cool.
And I have an actual pressman that lives in Noble, Oklahoma that's coming to, he'll be operating the press with all his big gear on. So yeah, make sure you make it to that. And then people for the first time since 2012 will be able to go down to the platform in the basement level and look at some of the really big machinery. And we came very close to having one of the automated machines ready to go for this, but it will be running next year. One of the automated machines will be running.
Very cool, very cool. All right. And Merry Christmas, Happy New Year,
Yeah.
because it'll be January before we're back here.
All right, we're adjourned.
Hanukkah.